In January 1898, the Illinois Board administered the nation's first architect licensing exam. As more states adopted architect licensing laws in the early 1900s, they each developed their own standards for licensure and examinations, making it difficult for licensed architects to practice across state lines. Recognizing the need to set some type of standard, one of NCARB's first goals was to identify the scope and content licensing exams should cover. In 1921, NCARB began offering the NCARB Standard Examination, a set of questions that states could give applicants in addition to their own exam. It included two versions, one for architects seeking initial registration and one for architects that had been grandfathered in. Applicants who took and passed either version could qualify for reciprocal registration in other states. The hope was that the NCARB Standard Examination would evolve into a national exam, but states were resistant to rely solely on NCARB's offering. In the early 1950s, the testing field went through a significant shift when multiple choice exams became the preferred method, along with scorecards that could be graded by a machine. The council moved to adapt its exam to the new technologies. Recognizing that following suit would be expensive for states, individual boards agreed that a national examination was the best solution. Creating the exam was a massive undertaking that took the rest of the 1950s and into the early 60s. The exam had grown to include 7 divisions. 5 would become multiple choice, and 2 would continue to require graphic responses on paper. With the help of testing consultant, education testing service, and dozens of volunteer architects, the exam launched nationally in 1965. The challenges related to the exam weren't over, however. The inconsistent education requirements across the country impacted the development of the exam. In the 70s, the council introduced 2 versions, one for those with a degree from an accredited program and a qualifying exam for those without the degree. While most candidates were only intended to take one of the exams, many boards required people to take both and wanted those seeking reciprocal registration to have taken each exam. To resolve the inconsistencies, the council used the results of the 1979 task analysis and validation study to create one exam for both audiences. In 1983, the Architect Registration Examination, or ARE, was born.
We would administer the exam through the state licensing boards, and each board would set up their own test centers, have their own proctors. That was all at their own logistical issues. They had to develop their own, costs, expenses, etc. But ETS would coordinate things like printing exams. The states would order the exams, ETS would print them, ETS would ship them, ETS would receive them, ETS would score them.
Soon after its launch, another major technological shift was on the horizon, the computer. The work done previously at drafting tables was quickly being replaced by computer programs. Wanting to stay in line with how the profession was working, the council began researching the feasibility and process of delivering a computer-based examination. To provide an even playing field for all candidates, NCARB would need to invest in a specialized design software so those using CAD-based systems in their office wouldn't have an advantage.
At the 1986 annual meeting in Atlanta, there were actually 50 computer-type machines, and it was the first test of a computer-administered examination.
The last paper and pencil examination that was administered in the U.S. was in June of 1996. And then the new computer-based examination started, 8 months later on February 24th, 1997.
Enormous costs that were associated with the exam and how we were going to fund them and pay for them.
When it launched, the ARE testing software was quite advanced, but it became difficult and expensive to keep pace with what architects were using in their offices.
Bringing the design and the site planning test to the computer was the most challenging part. You can't write a multiple choice question. You have to somehow create the software and the ability for a pre-licensure candidate to be able to draw the way he was drawing, which was no longer with a T-square and a drawing board. They were doing everything on computer.
The people who were working in offices or who had learned any kind of a CAD drawing were working with a different program that didn't work the same way.
In 2011, the NCARB Board of Directors decided to press pause on its investment in maintaining graphic portions of the exam.
The platform for the exam and the tools to support the exam were starting to get a little dated.
New and easier to maintain options could test minimum competency to practice without necessarily needing graphic-only divisions.
So the board agreed to go through a very deliberative process regarding what kind of a new approach could we have.
The new version, called ARE 5.0, launched in 2016 and incorporated new graphic question types that could be easily developed and graded. Throughout the exam's evolution, two things have remained constant. It has been developed by architect volunteers from across the country, and its objective is to measure competency to practice architecture that protects the health, safety, and welfare of the public.